My name's Amanda Slacksmith. I'm the Associate Curator at the Australian Cinematheque and also the very lucky curator who got to work on Marvel creating the cinematic universe. And part of my pleasure in this process was actually working with artists like Wayne Nichols, who's here beside me, who's happily come to join and talk to us about the experience of being obviously a comic book artist talking in our Writers series today. So Wayne's background, he's Brisbane-based, artist best known for his work in the US comic book industry, illustrating titles for Marvel such as The Incredible Hulk and Exiles, as well as publications for IDW Publishing, Dark Horse Comics and Radical Comics. We'll have some time for some questions at the end here, but welcome Wayne, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, it's really good to be here.
So you and I first started talking when this exhibition was about sort of 6 months out, and we were looking for something for that opening exhibition space. I contacted you and said I want something dynamic, I wanted to be Spider-Man, and you ended up giving me something totally beautiful. There's actually 4 very beautiful drawings. Only one made it in the space.
I like to throw
this
out
one. So tell me a little bit about the process of actually your end of it. I mean, my end was super easy. You just gave me exactly what we wanted first up.
Well, the thing is that made it really easy for me because you'd said, you know, Spider-Man's the perfect guy to kind of represent the Marvel Universe, so how about a shot of Spider-Man swinging through New York City? And immediately I start to get images in my head from years of reading comic books and watching the movies of Spider-Man swinging through the city, so it was really easy for me to kind of picture it a few different ways and you know, throw them your way and say, you know, which one do you prefer?
So this obviously ended up being 5 meters by 8 meters. That's not how you drew it.
No, certainly not. But I've said this to a few people so far. It's like seeing my artwork that big. I think I'm getting a taste for it now. It's like, wow. My process is generally working on paper at A4 or A3 size. So I'll do a pencil sketch, just as like they call them thumbnail layouts. So it's like literally the size of a thumbnail or slightly bigger. It's just like a really loose little sketch. And so this started with the same process, just a couple of scribbles just to kind of capture what I was seeing in my head. And then I take that into Photoshop. This is sort of my process. I work digitally a lot of the time. So I blow them up in Photoshop, add a little more detail. And those were the sketches that I sent through to you guys to see which one you liked best.
Fantastic. And I mean, one of the challenges have to be dynamics in an image, because comics are all about showing movement and action from panel to panel. So what were some of the things you were considering when doing Spider-Man?
Well, Spider-Man, he's all about movement and looking totally at ease and you know, in control and cool, like dynamic. I mean, different artists kind of draw in different ways, but in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he's done, it's within the realms of what the human body is actually capable of. So some artists will really bend his body into like freaky positions that no human body could ever do. So I kind of tried to work within the means of what the human body is capable of. And just to it's one of the things in comics, you want to enhance the dramatics of the movement, and one of the key things that I try to do is everything is like the full range of movement. So in superhero comics in particular, it's really nice when you've got say a character's having a fight scene or something and they're throwing punches at each other. Everything's like full range of movement, so full extension of the limbs, because otherwise it creates just sort of a half movement and it doesn't really look as dramatic. So that was, I mean, as you can see in the drawing there, I really sort of have him sort of swinging forward and his legs, flying in front of him, and he looks kind of cool, That was the main, that was kind of the catch word in my head. It was like, he's got to look as cool as possible and as kind of in the moment, like, as possible.
Yes, I mean, it is in the title, isn't it? When you're talking about superheroes, they need to be heroic and look heroic at all times.
It's going to be amazing. Amazing Spider-Man.
No, I mean, one of the things you and I talked about at the time was colour. and we ended up going black and white. But how do you go about actually adding in colour for something like this if you were going to?
If I was going to do it, I would do it digitally in Photoshop. That's sort of a standard program for colouring comic books these days. There's a few people who paint traditionally, like there's some Alex Ross original artwork, but I mean that guy is, you know, he's like a god amongst comic book artists. There's not many who can produce work like that, and he produces it quite quickly as well. So I produce my colour work digitally in Photoshop, and it's based on the line work is a layer in Photoshop, and then I will chuck in flat colours underneath on another layer, and then on top of that I might have a layer for highlights, and I'll kind of render up all the bright spots, the highlights, and then another layer will probably be shadows, and the flat layer sort of defines the mid-tones of the piece and the colours. So it's pretty much the process, yeah. I chop and change the process from time to time, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons we went black and white in the show was because obviously we have the original Steve Ditko Spider-Man there, and it was a lovely way to have a conversation between the original artwork and also you see the contemporary interpretation of that.
Yeah, it's amazing, like having my artwork beside the very first appearance of Spider-Man drawn by Steve Ditko. I mean, mind-blowing, really. for me as a fan and a comic book artist, yeah, it's like an unparalleled kind of experience.
It is worth going to have a look at if you haven't seen it yet. It's a national treasure in the United States. It was loaned to us by the Library of Congress, and a very incredibly rare piece of artwork that they allowed us to borrow one page out of 11, but they were very reluctant to let it out of the United States, so it's a very special thing. But how do you think Spider-Man has actually moved on from Steve Ditko to where you are at the moment?
You know, looking at it, I was surprised by how much he hasn't moved on. Like the costume is there in its entirety. I mean, he's got a little more muscle tone these days. You know, that's probably the biggest thing. But it's really is remarkably similar. Yeah, I think you know what he did with that costume design is so iconic. I mean, the red and the blue color scheme, and with the white eyes and the big eyes. I was thinking about this the other day. One of the things that seems to come together to create impressive artwork is the combination of bold details and fine details, and so it's really obvious in the Spider-Man artwork because you've got the eyes which are framed by the big bold black shapes, and then you've got all the webbing over, which is like the fine details, but then it's broken up with the blue leggings, and it just sort of comes together to create such an amazing, iconic design that's, you know, I mean, that's why it hasn't changed, because it was perfect in its first incarnation.
Yeah. So why do you think Spider-Man has been so beloved? I mean, he's one of the most long-lasting, beloved superheroes. I mean, I've seen a lot of Spider-Man, small Spider-Man, running around the gallery today.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Well, I guess he's very relatable because he's a high school kid who hasn't got everything figured out. So he's just trying to make his way in the world, but he had that experience with his Uncle Ben that's sort of taught him that he has to, with, you know, great power comes great responsibility. So
it's a good lesson.
Yeah.
Pumping out there.
It's a really important lesson, and he's learnt it at such a young age. He's got this amazing power, and he realised, okay, I've got to use this for the common good. You know, it can't just waste this gift that he's been given. And you know, a completely different person maybe would have, but he's chosen the right path, and that's what's so inspirational about him as a character, I think.
Yeah. Talking of paths, let's touch base on what your path was. I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't ask how you become a comic book artist, because that's not a straightforward road for many. There's no school curriculum for that.
No, yeah. I mean, I'm pretty much entirely self-taught as an artist. I studied graphic design out of high school, but it didn't really teach me much in the way of illustration techniques. Yeah. So everything that I do in my work is totally self-taught, like studying comic books and you know, reading. I mean, one of the really good guides for doing superhero comics is How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way by Stan Lee and John Buscema. That's like the still like a golden Bible of
So we
how to
brought you
draw
full
comics.
circle.
But yeah, more or less. Yeah, I mean, I remember getting that when I was maybe 15, and I was just getting into superhero comics. I mean, I started out reading Foot Flats and Mad Magazine and that type of thing at the local newsagent, and I was drawing my whole life, so I was doing sort of cartoony doodles, and then I started seeing it, as I was getting a little older, started seeing books like Wolverine, which had more realistic artwork, and my own artwork started to evolve and change and reflecting what my tastes were, and I spent countless hours, and I think about it now, I was always like at home drawing, so it was my passion from the beginning. So the steps of becoming a comic book artist, that's a long story.
Well, how about we go into, at what point did you know that you would be able to have a career as a comic book artist? What was the defining moment when, I've kind of made it?
Probably, when I'm 38 now, so when I was 19, I had done some samples of my work, and I had drawn my own comic books, and I posted them online and gotten some feedback and gotten hired by a couple of publishers, just small scale publishers. So that was the first sort of time that I was actually working and getting paid to do comic books. But it didn't seem like, it just seemed so far removed, because I was here in Australia just sending the artwork off, which is exactly what I do now, but back then when I was 19, it didn't seem like I could do that realistically as a career. So I went into another line of work, which was doing poker machine artwork for 5 years, and I was working with a team of artists, and I sort of rose to the level of lead artist in that team. And the whole time I still, in the back of my mind, had this passion for comics, and the artwork that I was doing for these poker machines was basically comic book artwork on poker machines. So eventually I just decided I got to have a go at doing comics again, because it felt like it was more achievable, and I had 5 years of experience at that point of working as a professional artist in a studio atmosphere. So I felt confident enough that I could probably then maybe quit that job and try comics full time. So it was probably the moment was when I went over to San Diego Comic-Con with a folio of artwork and some printed out samples, and I met with editors at Marvel Comics and DC Comics, and they all really liked the work. And I came back to Australia, and I got a gig on a Star Wars comic, and that was it was around that time where everything was sort of coming together, and it was like, okay, I can do this for a living, I think, at this point, and it just kept going from there.
Yeah, fabulous. So we talked a little bit earlier about the process you and I went through of commissioning this work, but obviously it'd be much different when you're working with a company, or is it different? I mean, I find this kind of living in Brisbane, working internationally, very fascinating.
Yeah.
I don't understand how that works, so elaborate a little.
It's actually exactly the same as the process that we went through.
Okay.
Yeah, which I don't know if that's surprising or not, but most of the time, most of the work that I do, I get an email and they say, we really like your work and what we've seen on your website. Are you available to draw this comic book? And I just say yay or nay based on if I'm busy with work or not, or if I can like line it up into my schedule down the track. And it's the same kind of process. I think that's what made it kind of painless and easy to do this and to work together on this, because I'll get contacted, they'll send me a script for a comic book, I'll do up the layouts for the pages, send them through, maybe get some feedback, or maybe not. A lot of the time it's all good to go from the first go. And the difference is I don't do, if I'm drawing a comic book, I don't do like 4 different versions of each page, because that would take me forever.
Understandable.
Yeah. And these things are on like quite tight deadlines, so you got to kind of get it right first time, or may not have a job next month on that book. Yeah. So it's the same kind of process. I'll do like layouts for pages, send them through, they approve them, and then I draw them up, send them off, and it's done. Yeah.
Okay. So how much collaboration do you do with the writer? Do you ever talk to the writer?
Yeah. It depends. Yeah, it depends on the project. In comics, it's mostly done through editorial. So there's like the middle people who kind of hold the ship together. And so you've got different creatives. You've got the writer, you've got the penciler, you've got an inker. I tend to do the pencils and the ink, so I sort of combine that into one. You have someone who letters the comics, you'll have someone who colors the comics, and then the editorial team sort of holds it all together and talks to everyone, coordinates everything. So yeah, it's generally talking to the editors.
Okay. Do you ever actually then see the printed comic back and go, ooh, okay, that's not how I thought it was going to be?
Yeah, all the time.
But, and what usually is the thing that
I've had
tips
some
it
bad
into you?
experiences, yeah. And like at the moment, I'm working with an amazing colorist who's based in Malaysia. So it's I'm drawing the Orphan Black comics. So the writer is in Canada, colorist is in Malaysia. They're being published out of San Diego, and I'm here in Brisbane drawing it. So it's really spread around the world.
So obviously not naming names, but what have been some of the challenges? Definitely not naming names. Artists get really particular about having a certain look to their artwork, and I'm no different. So I want it to, and since I can do every aspect of comic books, so I'm very particular on how I want it to look. And sometimes you're coupled with an inker or a colorist that isn't a good fit for your artwork, or maybe isn't at the same skill level as what I'm at. And it might, I'm sure in the past, and maybe even now, I don't know, that might happen at some point in the future, I'll be combined with someone who may not be a good fit. But I've been matched by, inkers and colorists that haven't really been a good fit, and the end result is kind of obvious, Things like, you can see on the line work there, when I do the rendering on, say, the leg muscles, it's all kind of curved around to create the form of the legs. And I've worked on a project where the inker just sort of straightened everything out, and it was a nightmare. And I was talking to the editorial saying, can we do something about this? Can we maybe get someone else? But they were like, oh, looks pretty good to us. So I just finished up that job and moved on. That's all you can do. So do you actually find that you now ask to find out what teams you're working with before you commit?
And I've been lucky in the last few books that I've done that I'm working with the same team who are, and I recommended the colorist that I'm working with currently on this latest book. I said, can we get him on this next book? And they said, yeah, you guys are making a really good team. So I think, the editorial can see it if everything's coming together in a good way, and they want to keep the team together if they can.
Is there any, when you get these emails, obviously you probably get a wide range of different types of comics to work on. Is there anything that you just sort of go, no, that's not really my area?
I've done a few things outside of comics, and I was contacted recently by a dance artist in Sydney. He does dance music, and he works with Flume, who very high profile. He won the Grammy Award, the Best Dance Album. Yeah, he shares a studio with Flume, and he wanted to create a visual image of himself to kind of promote his dance music, and it was sort of a cartoony indie style, and it didn't really fit what I am known for doing and what I'm comfortable with doing with my artwork. So I did a few sketches, but at the end of the day, it just wasn't really compatible. So we're still friends, but it just didn't work out as like a business thing.